first, we'll also hear from artists, we'll hear from ambassadors. When I first came to UN headquarters like 11 years ago, we didn't have this many women ambassadors. We still don't have enough, but it's such a pleasure to be able to go to work every day with ambassadors like the ambassador of Hungary and the ambassador here of Panama, who has been fantastic on these issues, and the artists who are here today and the activists who are here today. But first, our keynote and opening speaker, Gloria Steinem. Okay, she needs no introduction, but for those of you who somehow don't know, now you'll know. Writer, lecturer, editor, feminist activist, recipient of the Presidential Medal of Freedom, the highest award that President Obama can bestow upon anyone. In 1972, she co-founded Miss Magazine. She's also one of the co-founders of New York Magazine. Her books include the bestsellers Revolution from Within, Outrageous Acts and Everyday Rebellions, Moving Beyond Words, and Marilyn. Her latest book, released in 2015, paperback copy to come out soon with a updated chapter on sex trafficking, I understand, is entitled My Life on the Road. And it's a book about more than 30 years of being on the road as a feminist organizer. And I would also tell you 2 or 3 other things about her. You know, Gloria graduated Phi Beta Kappa from Smith College in 1956 and then spent 2 years in India on a Chester Bowles Fellowship. She wrote for Indian publications and was influenced by Gandhian activism. She has been the subject of 3 biographical documentaries, including HBO's Gloria, in her own words. Gloria, it's such an honor to have you here today. The floor is yours.
I think it's good to be in this room because we have just a hint of a circle here. So, true, we have the hierarchical setup back there, you know, which means we're looking at each other's backs and I'm looking at you, and hierarchy is based on patriarchy, and patriarchy doesn't work anywhere anymore. But we have... But these seats are a little... We have a hint of a circle, so I hope that we can feel as if we are in a circle and understand that each of us has some part of the knowledge, the solution, the insight, the understanding that will contribute to the whole. And we need our circle. I just want to remind you, first of all, that this is not a women's issue. Hello. This is not a children's issue. This is a world issue. I have been shamelessly exploiting the great scholarship in a book called Sex and World Peace, which I recommend to you, Sex and World Peace. Because the scholars, and it's actually readable, though it's scholarly, have looked at absolutely every current country and proved that the single most important element or determinant of whether a country is violent within itself or whether it will be willing to use military violence against another country is not poverty, not access to natural resources, not religion, or even degree of democracy. It's violence towards females. Not because female life is any more important than male life, but because it is what happens first. The patriarchal systems that came into this earth in the last 5% of human history, it's important to understand they weren't always there, the basis of it is controlling reproduction. And you can't control a human being without violence. So it is really very organically built into these structures. And we may see it even in our homes, dominance, if not violence. We get the idea that it's okay for one group to dominate another, and that also creates a place for racism, for caste, for class, because we have been convinced that that's possible. So violence against females is basic in that way, and right now it has reached a point where, for the first time, there are fewer females on Earth than males. because of all the forms of violence cumulatively, whether it is sexualized violence in war zones, sex trafficking, which is obviously, we all know, is bigger than ever before, preference for sons, which has created a daughter deficit and a son surplus in so many parts of the world, female genital mutilation, domestic violence in this country, in my country, which is enormous, it's murdered more women by their husbands and boyfriends than have ever been killed in any terrorist event, and also in the last 3 wars. I mean, so, I just want to say that it really is basic, and not to allow ourselves to get shunted off into some compartment as if, that's over there. No, this must be part of every country's foreign policy. The easiest way to figure out how democratic and peaceful any group is to see, are there women there and how are they being treated? And that should be a measure in all of our foreign policies. And I think we must remember how basic it is in another way, because it really is all about controlling the means of reproduction. If women did not have wombs, we'd be fine. And racism and caste make it much worse, of course, because then you have to control reproduction in order to perpetuate those divisions in the long run. So they are really inextricably intertwined, and there's no way of changing the status of women without fighting racism, not only because women are members, half of every racial group, but also because racism itself is dependent on controlling reproduction. So this has caused this depth of the political system. People say there's a difference between culture and politics. I think actually what happens to men is political, what happens to women is cultural. But it's all political, it's all actually about power. And because of this emphasis on controlling reproduction, some women have been turned into, in a big anthropological sense, mainly the means of reproduction, and restricted, put on a pedestal. As a black suffragist said to her white suffragist sisters, a pedestal is as much a prison as any other small space. And also, then, for the sake of racial or caste or class purity, they've been separated. And the less socially desirable women are exploited as a means of reproduction for cheap labor, for workers, and so on. And this has separated the questions of sexuality and reproduction, and put some women in charge of sexuality and other women in charge of reproduction, if you see what I mean, when in fact that deprives some women of their sexuality and other women of their freedom in their bodies and so on. But we all have common cause in bringing back the control of ourselves, our reproduction and our sexuality to our own bodies. I think I fear that we sometimes get into the current hierarchical way of thinking by arguing about what policy is good from above. What generality is going to work down here. Actually, no generality is going to work for everything down here. It is very, very, very diverse. So I hope that our actions are not inhibited by waiting for a solution up there, in fact. And the question of free will and, are we using our bodies in whatever way it is for free will, out of our free will, is also very, is something we have to listen to each woman and groups of women about. If we say that at the age of 18, then it becomes not child sex trafficking, what do we do about the woman who, and as we know, the average age of entry into prostitution in this country is between 12 and 13. And in many other countries, it's about 9 or 10. So does she suddenly acquire free will at the age of 18? I think we've begun to look at situations where this, you might call the statute of limitations, is extended. For instance, when someone has been sexually abused in childhood, then we understand that the usual statute of limitations can't work in the same way. It's from the time that person, male or female, remembers it, and then we need that kind of subtlety in looking at the question of what is free will. Do we have the right to use our bodies in any way we wish? Absolutely. But to what extent is it free will when we are actually looking at a particular situation? So, I think that what's very helpful to me, speaking for myself, about the so-called Nordic solution, or what I think of as the third way, is that it is more nuanced. I mean, we have spent a lot of time arguing about legalization versus criminalization, right? Well, it seems to, sometimes I think the whole world is divided into two kinds of people, those who think the world is divided into two kinds of people and those who don't. And I think probably this division into two also comes from gender, and the old languages didn't even have gender, so we've gotten into this polarized legalization versus criminalization. And, there are probably situations in which some version of something, in each works. But because the Nordic example, the third way, is the most diverse and or provides for treating reality more and not putting it all into one package. And therefore, it obviously it sets out to give choices to the prostituted person, man, woman, or child, to provide them with choices, to penalize, not criminalize, I would say. It's not by any standard. Penalize the demand, the customer, so that at least that person gets to know what the global sex industry is and what damage is being done. It allows much more subtlety, and I think that's why we see it being adopted most recently by France, but by many other countries too. It allows for more recognition of reality. I think also, in addition to overgeneralizing, and getting into the division of two, sometimes we demand purity from our friends and nothing from our adversaries. We look at people who are in all goodwill, doing quite a good job of being helpful, and if they are not perfect, then we blame them when we don't demand even simple humanity from the traffickers and the people who are part of the problem. It's way easier to judge someone with little power than someone with a lot of power, or someone who's in proximity to us rather than someone who's very far away. So I hope that we support what is positive and worry less about criticizing what's not working. And most of all, I hope we listen to each other. There's nothing more important than listening to each other. I think one of the simplest paths to revolution that I know of is for people who have less power, or if you're in a particular situation and someone usually has more power than the others, listen as much as you talk. If you have more power, usually talk as much as you listen, which is not that easy because we're used to hiding if we've had less power. Right? So I think while understanding that we are dealing with something that is fundamental to every government, to the human race, to our relationships in our families, to the way we raise our children, that is mega, it's also deeply personal and reflected in the way we act every day. It's perhaps, I think Marx and Engels were very nice guys, but I think they made one error, which was to think that the ends justify the means. I think actually the means are the ends. So I hope that if we don't worry too much about what we should do, but do whatever we can and make what we do reflect the ends we want, that we will all get there together and we will truly be in a circle and we will help to broadcast the voices of so many people for whom all of you are speaking, and the realities that you know that cannot be in this room at this moment, but that we will help to empower, to find voices, and not to be objects sold in a global trade, but to be the unique, individual, valuable human beings that each one of us is. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Gloria. I cannot tell you how much it means to all the women and men in this audience that you were able to come here today on such a busy time. It means the world to all of us. Thank you.